Welcome back to the Meeple Marathon and our continued coverage of Batman, the animated series, The Shadow of the Bat. So today we're just going to be talking about how to set up and play the game, and at the end I will show you just these slight differences that you will need to bring out for and how to play the true solo mode. And then I'm going to follow that up by playing an episode, probably from the stretch goal box, just so you guys can see something different. And I'm going to be using the solo mode rules. So I haven't seen a lot of coverage on that, and so I wanted to show off how to play with just Batman, because essentially if you're playing this solo and you're playing the standard rules, you're having to play four-handed. That's not the end of the world, but you'll see what all that is going to involve. So let's go ahead and get started here with setup first. And the first thing you're going to need to do is track down one of your episode guides. So these are set up to look like a comic book, essentially, and you can see here's episodes 1 through 5. So to keep from covering a lot of spoilers, we're just going to go ahead and cover episode 1. This gives you some icon descriptions here and table of contents, credits, and then it is going to get into episode 1. So all of these episodes in the game, all the scenarios are based on actual episodes from the animated series. So you could actually go YouTube on Leatherwings right now, or Google it or whatever, and actually watch this episode, which includes Batman and the Man Bat. So there's some information here. Essentially what your win conditions are for the heroes and the villains. We are setting up for a cooperative game, but setup essentially is for the most part the same. And what the scenario rules are, this is telling us how we can walk out the door, how we can get through the door to actually get to Man Bat, what the terrain is, and then here, this is our goals in the game, and then this is the victory conditions in the game. So kind of want to read through all that, make sure you have it, and then we're going to flip over to the most important page, which is the setup page. So you can see here it's pretty straightforward, and there's a lot of information on this page, but let's kind of just go through it quickly. First of all, you'll notice big map, and you can see that I've already set up the map tiles beneath, and so these are very straightforward. You're going to put the specific villains right here, and we're going to put Man Bat right here, which you'll notice he's taking up 4 spaces on this map. Even though he has a small base, he is considered a giant character, which means he takes up all 4 spaces, and so you're going to kind of want to sit him on the intersection. And remember that to be adjacent to him, you just have to be like here or here. So we'll cover that more in the rules section later on down the road, but you're only going to need 2 clues and a door here with the closed side up. You're going to need 1 Man Bat figure, 4 enforcers, 4 hired guns, and then we're going to look over here. If you are playing competitive, you're going to get a certain number of focus to start the game with. You're going to get a certain hand size of cards to start with. And then you're going to create your villain deck based on these icons here. So essentially when you're playing as the villain in competitive mode, you have a hand of cards, you're playing one of them, and that's telling you who you can activate and what icons, essentially for the heroes, what dice they roll, you can utilize on your turn. However, for cooperative, you essentially need just the initiative cards. So 1 for each hero, 2 Man Bats. So Man Bat gets 2 initiative cards, 1 enforcer, and 1 hired gun initiative card. That's really about it. And then at the bottom here, they have recommended heroes for the mission. Now, since you see nothing but green stars up here, that means you can choose any 4 heroes you want. But you do, however, need 4 heroes. This game doesn't scale without 4 heroes because of the sharing of the dice thing and the amount of enemies they put on the board. You can play solo, you can play 2 players, but like if you play 2 players, each of you is controlling 2 characters, so on and so forth. So they're giving you some recommended heroes. These are obviously, this is the first mission, this is the basic heroes from the base game, and that's what we've set up with. They also give you recommended build outs for your heroes. So you can see that the heroes each have a stat here, which is 2, 3, 4, and 4. And if you want to take No, so those are the number of skill cards you can take. So let me just show you an example of some of Batman's skill cards here. And I have just done his build out based on his recommended cards. So he's got Judo Throw, he's got Driven by the Past, and he's got Shield and Cape. Now, just real quickly, the iconography on here, there's some stuff that's going to tell you when you can activate these cards and what it does, but also up here you can see like you have to spend a focus to do Judo Throw. You have to spend a focus and a movement symbol on one of your dice to do Shield and Cape, and Driven by the Past you can spend without having to spend anything, but then you lose it. That's what the X means. But essentially here's 3 of his cards. Well, he has a focus limit of 4. Well, Batman, being Batman, has a utility belt. You can see that Robin has one, so does Batgirl. Jim Gordon, however, does not. If you have a utility belt, you can take gear with you. So without a utility belt, no gear. But to take gear, what you have to do is give up one skill card in order to choose then 4 gear. And the gear is kind of one-time use stuff, and you just kind of keep that off to the side. And so that's how you make these decisions. So you'll notice that in their decisive loadout, Robin here is going to gain 3 for 3. He doesn't take any gear, even though he has a utility belt. And Batgirl has 2, so she's given up 1 for 4 gear, and then just has 1 skill card. So basically, you can decide how you want to load out your character, or you can go by the recommendations in the book. Okay, so just so you know, I'm going to set this book off to the side now, but it pretty much tells you everything you need to know here in the book. So we've got our closed door here. I've got my 2 objective tokens, or I think they're called secrets, clues in the game. These clues are double-sided. You don't care about the color of the stars in this version. You just need 2 question mark tokens. Your heroes can start anywhere along the path here. And so I am going to set them up like this, and then we're going to put you here and you here, because when you are playing with Jim Gordon, you get the Beat Cops with you. As you can see here on his sheet, add the Beat Cop hero sheet to the play area and 2 Beat Cop figures to the battle. So boom, boom, there you go. And now I've covered up all of the green stars that are on that setup sheet, and these are all the heroes. Now, you can add these plastic tokens to the base if you choose to. It's supposed to help you easily identify who's a hero and who's not. I did not have a problem with that, even though everything's gray. I plan on painting these eventually, so you know, we'll see. I may do that. If I don't get around to painting these before I do my playthrough, then maybe we will put those on, but we'll see. But they recommend doing that as well. All right, and then we're also going to put in our hired guns here according to the setup. So these guys all go in here. One here, one here, one here, and one here. Okay, so we've got all the figures on the board, and I've got all of my hero boards in front of me with my stretch goal exclusive player boards here. You don't need to use these. Frankly, they do take up a considerable amount of room, but they have slots for these. Normally, you know, you would have Batman here, and you would say, okay, I'm going to put my skill cards here, and I'm going to put my gear here, but for the purposes of filming and fitting everything on my table, I'm just going to put the cards down below them. There you go. I've got my Beat Cop here above Jim Gordon. I've got my reference sheet, which also serves for your placing your initiative deck and having your draw and discard pile. You don't need to use that, but you do want to have this handy. And then you have a card for each of the villains. So then what you're going to need is an initiative card, and we already discussed. We've got our 4 hero initiative cards here. So there's our 4 heroes. The Beat Cops do not get their own. They activate when Jim Gordon activates. Then we have hired guns and enforcers, and then Man-Bat gets 2. So you can see these all look exactly the same on the backside, and this is how turn order is going to be decided each round. So you're basically just going to shuffle these up shuffle these up and place them right over here. We'll put them this way and we'll flip them this way. All right. Then, so this pretty much, we've got this covered. You're then going to need some dice. You're going to want these basic black and white dice are going to be shared by all of the heroes. So if you're playing multiplayer, you want to put these in an area where both of you can reach. I'm just going to set them off to the side for now. Then each character is going to get 3 unique dice. And if you're having trouble knowing which dice you should get, you can see at the bottom of their character sheets here is the color of their dice, also the symbols, so you can have a quick refresher. So we know Jim Gordon's is brown, we know Batman's is black and yellow, Robin's is red, and Batgirl's is blue and yellow. That way you don't get them confused with, say, Catwoman's dice, who are also in the base game bag. You can just leave these out for right now. To start the game, you're going to roll these out, and then we'll decide. Also, each character here is going to gain focus equal to their focus limit to start the game. So Batgirl actually gets 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boom. Let's see. Robin gets 3. 1, 2, 3. Batman's going to get 4. And Jim Gordon, 1, 2, 3, 4. And what's Jim get? He also gets 3. 1, 2, 3. And then if you happen to have the stretch goals, you can also get a health dial for each character. You could even give one to Man-Bat if you so choose. For right now, I'm just going to set those off to the side. But that's essentially setup. Setup is not super difficult, especially for the maps that don't involve a lot of these terrain tokens, because the map tiles are all the same size. They're pretty large, so usually you're only going to have like 2 to 4 out at any given time. And you know, once you understand that everybody gets dice, everybody gets focus, and everybody gets some cards, setting up your heroes are very simple. Setting up the miniatures, you just follow the book. It's all very straightforward. So setup is actually quite simple for like a miniature heavy game. So that's going to do it for setup. Again, at the end of the video, I'm going to cover setup for the solo Dark Knight mode, which is playing just as Batman. We'll tack that onto the end of the video. So for now, this is going to do it for setup. Let's talk about how to play. Okay, so the first thing that you are going to do at the beginning of a round, especially as the heroes, is going to be roll out your dice. Essentially what you're doing is establishing the actions that you are going to be able to take on your turn. And what's really unique to this system, this was not the first game in the Adventures Universal Game System line. They have a TMNT version of this game, but essentially you are sharing dice with the character on your left and right. So just let me go ahead and give you an example here. So I've rolled out everyone's dice. Now technically Batman has the ability where he can place the middle die in his slot to anything he chooses. And I probably, for this example, would have chosen a double punch. So let's just say I chose double punch. That's like one of his special passive abilities, is to choose, it's basically a wild, choose the side he wants, place it in the middle. That means he's not going to share it. But then from there, he needs to decide, all right, whatever I put on this side, I'm going to share with Robin, and whatever I put on this side, I'm going to share with Jim Gordon. So taking a look here, just wondering, Robin doesn't have any defense. Jim Gordon's got a pretty good amount of defense, so maybe I'm going to share a defense and punch with Robin and a double ranged attack with Jim Gordon. Well, Jim Gordon is thinking, Batgirl has no ranged attack, so I'm going to share this with her, and I can share this back with Batman, and I'll just take a standard defense in the middle. Let's see, Robin's going to go like this, and he'll share a double ranged and a movement. He wants to share movement with Batman, because otherwise Batman would have no movement. And you see Jim Gordon doesn't have any movement either, so Batgirl's going to share her movement with him, and she's going to share a double punch with Robin and take a defense in the middle. So now, all of a sudden, what looked like, role for Jim Gordon, where he was basically going to be fighting away from the back and not be able to hit anybody, he's got some movement. Robin, who had very little attacks, now got a decent amount of attack. And so to represent, so you don't have to look and remember what was shared with you, then you go around and you're going to take these tokens and you're going to say, okay, he shared a double wing and I'm sharing a movement back with him. So he'll put this here. Here we're going double ranged again. So he's going to get that. And over here, he's going to get a double punch. Let's see here. What else do we need? We need this one. And over here is going to be a... No, he is sharing this here, and he's sharing this here. Here he's sharing a movement with me. And here he's sharing a double ranged. So this is a little fiddly, but it's not the end of the world. And I, again, am playing 4 players deep. So it's a lot more fiddly when you have 4 characters to do it with. That's 8 tokens. When I played this the first time, I played with just 1 other player, and so we each were controlling 2 players, and it went by really fast. Okay. So now that you have rolled out your dice, you've established the actions that you're going to take. When it's your turn, you are essentially going to spend the actions, or spend the dice to take those actions, and that's what these fancy boards are for. You slide them up as you spend them. Now, the only ones that you don't technically spend are the defense symbols. So these 2 especially, which are defense only symbols, are just going to sit there. But what they represent is boosting up your defensive stat when you are attacked. This one, however, and this one, which both have attack symbols, ranged and melee, you can spend those. You can go ahead and push those up to use the attack symbols on them. But when it comes time to defend, Jim Gordon will look, he's got 2 defensive symbols, so he will add that to his base 2, and he will have a defense value of 4. We'll get into what that means here later on, but this is essentially how you take actions on your turn, and you can take them in any order you choose. If you need to move a great distance, you can go ahead and spend 2 movement points together, multiplying your movement value, which for Robin would be 4 times 2 to get 8. Or say, for example, you want to move, then attack, and then back up. So maybe he's going to move 4, then he's going to attack here. Or maybe he moved up 4, got adjacent. He's going to use his melee attacks, get those out of the way. Then he's going to back up, and then he's going to attack from range. These are all decisions that you can make. What you cannot do, however, is split up the doubles. So this is a double ranged attack. This is a double melee attack. You cannot say, all right, I'm going to take, half of this die and make a single ranged melee attack, do all my movements, do all this stuff, come back, and then finish it off. So the doubles always have to be spent in their entirety. If you so choose to say he's got a total movement of 4 times 2 would be 8. Say he only needs to go 6 spaces. He's got to spend both of these to get 6. Those last 2 points of movement are lost. He doesn't get to spend them later. So, real quick, just as far as movement is concerned, you cannot interrupt your movement to take another action. So if you interrupt your movement at any point in time to take another action, all your remaining movement points are lost. So that makes it a little bit easier, a little less strategic, but a little easier that you don't have to remember how many movement points you had at the end of the day. Okay, so let's just kind of go through the various symbols. I think I have most of them pretty well covered here except one, but that's a good one to save for the end. So let's start with movement. So when you spend movement icons, you simply gain the amount of movement times the movement icons you spent, and you can move that many spaces. Now there is various rules for terrain. I'm not going to get into those in this video because they're rather comprehensive. there is a nice page in the rule book and the glossary here that is going to give you, glossary terrain. So these 2 pages basically give you everything to know. I basically kept my book open to that the first couple times I played, and just that enabled me to know, okay, when I enter the yellow terrain, which is essentially climbing up on the table, I have to spend an extra point of movement. So to go from table to table, that's another extra point of movement. So you figure that kind of stuff out. This purple border means you're entering bottomless terrain, I think it is. So you're basically falling. So just know that the terrain around you can affect your movement. But otherwise, you're simply spending however many move tokens you have or want to spend and moving. You can move diagonally in this game, but you cannot move through any other characters, whether it's an ally or a villain. So, for example, right now, Jim Gordon is kind of stuck in the back. Robin's kind of stuck in the back. So hopefully Robin doesn't activate first. Now, I did look up something in the rule book, and I determined that these beat cops do not have to start in one of the starting spaces. So I could actually start Jim Gordon here, my 2 beat cops here, which they are adjacent, and Robin here, which would be a much better play, not pinching Robin near the back, because again, if Robin comes up first, he's basically stuck and not able to do anything. So just a little errata there on my previous setup discussion. Anyways, so movement's pretty straightforward. You can move diagonally, you cannot move through characters of any type. If you are adjacent to an enemy and you want to move, you have to make a break action, which means you have to spend an additional movement point to move for every person that's adjacent to you. So if I wanted to back up, that's actually 2 points of movement to back away from this one person. Or if I'm here and there's 1, 2, 3, because diagonal is adjacent people, just to move here would cost me 4 points of movement. So the more you're surrounded, the more movement points you have to spend just to take a single move action. The last thing about movement that is important to know is there are special what's called terrain moves. Now, terrain moves are going to allow you to do things like leap, climb, because there is going to be differences in elevation. Elevation is not represented on this board, except technically the purple is, but there's going to be times where you can go up or down the side of a building, things like that. So to climb up and down is a terrain move. You can also crouch. So say you are here behind this difficult terrain, you can actually crouch down behind it, which gives you additional defense value. Otherwise, you're just standing up behind it. They can see your full torso, so they can shoot you like normal. And then there is also take cover, which is even more, essentially you remove yourself from sight, but you have to be behind a certain type of terrain to do that. I don't think the table counts as that. So those are movement or actions you can take by spending 2 movement icons. So if you want to leap, for example, leaping allows you to go 1, 2, 3 in any straight line, ignoring breakaway, ignoring like obstructing terrain. As long as you have a safe place to land, you basically jump. But to do that, you're going to spend 2 movement points. Or if you happen to be, let's just say this is an alleyway and this is, 1 level of building. If you're here and need to climb up to the top of the roof, you can spend 2 movement points to just go from there to there. All right, other than that, movement is pretty straightforward. And again, this symbol here on your card is your movement value. So now let's talk about attacking, because that's the most common symbols you're going to see. Now there are 2 types of attacks, but they both act the same way. So you have melee attacks. These are your standard punch actions. You have to be adjacent to the person you're attacking, but remember, at this stage I could attack any one of these 3 people because they're all adjacent to me. Now, I don't particularly agree with their choice of how they decided to make this, because movement is the amount of movement icons times the number of movement points you get. Whereas attack is for each attack symbol, For each attack symbol you spend, it's added to your base attack value. So again, here we're multiplying, here we're adding. I don't really like that they made it two different types of math, just because it's very easy for someone, especially early on, to say, ooh, I'm spending, or, you know, here for Batman, who's got a base value of 2, 1, 2, 3 symbols times 2 is 6. I'm rolling 6 dice, when in actuality, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dice. Now, that's only one difference, but, you know, it is a difference. So, when you are making an attack, especially right now we're just referring to melee attacks, you are going to spend all the icons you want to spend. So in this case, I'm spending 2, 3. We'll go ahead and spend 3. Plus 1 is 4. In that instance, you're going to take 4 of these battle dice here. So these are not your hero dice. These are the black and white battle dice, which just have the bat symbol and the blast symbol. The blast symbol is a hit. The Batman symbol is the defense, a block. So you're going to take these, you're going to roll them up, and at this point you have to exceed the defensive value of the AI. So again, we're playing cooperatively. If you were playing competitively, you'd actually be rolling defense dice. But in this case, we see that they have a defense value of 2, and of 4. So they basically always, as if they always roll, you know, the Enforcer and the Hired Gun, basically it's as if they always roll this every time. So we take my hits, we cancel out any blocks, and I'm left with 1 hit making it through. So in that instance, I would put a hit point marker next to whoever I punched, say it was this guy, and then we continue. If I had more stuff to spend, I could spend it. So sticking with Robin as our example here, Robin could also take a ranged action. Ranged actions work the same way, and it's even using the same symbol. So his 1, 2, 3, so he's going to roll 3 dice. The defender is still going to get 2 defense, and I'm going to roll out here, and I got 3 hits. So again, subtracting their 2 base block, I'm left with 1 again. So that guy would be 2 hits. If it was an Enforcer here, he's got 5 health. If it was the Hired Gun, he's only got 3. But ranged actions start to decrease in value the further away you are. So normally you only want to be 2 spaces away from a person to conduct a ranged action, which really is not very far away. These games are not about firing across the board or anything like that. There's no snipers in Batman, at least to my knowledge. So this is optimal range, where you're 1, 2 spaces away. For everything beyond that, you start reducing your total hit count by 1 for each space further than that. So even here, if he had fired from here and still rolled 3, 2 of them would have been blocked, but since he's 1, 2, 3 spaces away, he loses 1 more. There are cards, however. For example, Robin here has the sling. This says Robin's ranged strikes do not weaken for the first 4 spaces. Also, when Robin places tokens on the map, we're not going to get into that. But basically, Robin has like double the range before he starts losing priority. So if he were, say, right here, and you counted 1, 2, 3, his roll would still get 1 through. He could even fire from here. 1, 2, 3, 4. When you are counting range, you essentially need to make sure you have line of sight, which would be a straight line. So from his thing to his thing, there's nothing blocking. This is difficult terrain, this is not blocking terrain. And figures do not block line of sight either. So figures block movement, but they do not block line of sight. But then once you're counting range, you simply count the shortest distance, and you're going to have to bounce around and count diagonally and things like that. In this case, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces away. So in this instance, he would still receive no penalty for doing his ranged attack. So ideally, most of the time, you're going to want to throw out as many of the same symbol out there as at once. Because that's just going to give you more chances to make hits, get above their defensive value, and actually hit the person. Now, say you roll and you rolled, nothing but blocks, and you were attacking. That's nothing. You didn't hit. But that's where your focus tokens come in. You can spend a focus token once per round, or once per turn, to re-roll any amount of dice. So I could set some aside, or in this instance, I would probably say I'm going to re-roll all 3. There are some special abilities like Batgirl, who allows you to re-roll more than once. She still has to spend a focus token, but she, at least that I've seen so far, is the only one who can re-roll more than once. But that's one of the ways to spend one of your focus tokens. And when you are on defense, you can re-roll your defense rolls, you can re-roll your attack rolls. You cannot spend them to re-roll your hero dice, but there are other things that you can spend them on. We'll get to that here in a minute. Okay, so we've talked about movement. We've talked about attacks, both melee and ranged. Again, the last symbols that are on any of these dice are the defensive symbols. So remember, you don't actually spend those. Those are just there, so when the AI attacks you, especially in cooperative mode, they make it very easy. If you were playing competitively, the villains would be rolling dice just like you did. It'd basically be a reverse. But for cooperative games, the AI has a certain attack value that they hit you with every single time. So the Enforcer and the Hired Gun both hit you for 2 hits. So they have a standing 2-hit dice roll. So in this instance, let's say Jim Gordon is defending here. He's got 1, 2, and you don't even have to spend them because you get to keep them until you come around and the next round you're re-rolling these dice. So he's got 1, 2 defense symbols and 2 base symbols. So he's rolling 4 dice. And he's looking, and that's an excellent roll. So he actually blocked 3, only 2 came in, so he doesn't take any damage. And so again, defense is pretty straightforward, but it is also like the attack symbols that you are adding. So this is +1 die, this is +1 die, this is +2 dice. While we're on the subject of defense, let's talk about these 2 values right here on your player card. So for example, Batman has a base health of 13. There are other things that can increase this. But then he has an awakening health of 8. So this is easily the most confusing thing that I came across in the rulebook, was the awakening and how they worded it. So the easiest way for me to explain it to you is to simply say, okay, if you have a health dial, this makes it a little easier. You start with 13 health. And you are slowly being hit throughout the game, you're ticking down, and then eventually you're going to get to 0. I don't know why they didn't give us a 0. But you cannot go below 0. You can't go into the negative on hit points. So we're just going to call 20 0. When you want to awaken that you're not killed, you're not knocked out of the game, you're just knocked over. So you tip your player character down. When it comes back to your turn, you're going to roll, and what's nice is that you can, you're still going to roll your hero dice at the end of the next round, so chances are you're going to get a chance to roll these out, and you're looking for defense symbols, because if you're trying to stand back up, you're going to roll a number of these dice equal to your defense value. So in this case, Batman would just be rolling 4. But you also get bonuses for adjacent allies. You get negative bonuses you get negative dice taken away for adjacent villains and bosses, things like that. That's all in the rule book. I'm not going to go through every single one of those, but just know that you're probably going to be rolling, a good amount of dice. The more the better, because what you need to do is roll these out, and this was a pretty poor roll. For every hit that you see, not defense symbol, but hit, you get to tick back up your life. So in this instance, I would go back up to 4. Now, in order to stand back up, I need to reach this 8 symbol. So that's not an easy number to reach. So it's not take 13 wounds and then reduce them down to 8. It's imagine you start with 13 health, you take your wounds all the way down to 0, and then you have to regain your health back up to 8. So you can see here, like Robin has an easier, and Batgirl have an easier time of standing up than, say, Batman and Jim Gordon. Mainly that's because Batman has a higher threshold, Jim Gordon's old. If you don't accomplish this on your turn, your turn's over, you have a knocked out token placed next to you, and you can continue to try and stand up again, rolling more dice the next time. Say I got to roll all these again and I rolled another 4, so this time I'd finally be able to stand up. Alright. If, however, everybody on your team ends up knocked out at the same time, so if you really struggle for 2 or 3 rounds to stand back up and then everybody else gets knocked down as well and they're struggling, then you will lose the game. But that is Awakening as best as I can describe it. Again, in my opinion, this was the most confusing part of the rulebook. Alright, so let's get to the final die symbol that everybody has at least one of in the game, and that is the bat symbol, which looks amazing on Batman's dice. I just, think of Michael Keaton Batman when I see this, and the Joker, and what an amazing movie. Anyways, when you roll the bat symbol here, this is going to do a lot of things for you. First off, you're going to get to roll a single battle die, and in this case I got 2 hits. I would be able to recover 2 health. Okay, you also will get to regain a focus token up to your focus value, so if you already had 4, you don't get to gain 1. Alright, so this is a chance to regain focus, this is a chance to heal, and then you get to take this die and flip it to whatever side you want. So I'm going to now make this a double ranged, and you can then share that double ranged with Robin. You cannot place this down and say, I'm sharing a bat symbol with you. That doesn't work. You have to manipulate your die before you place it down if it starts on a bat symbol. And for Batman, you cannot choose to make your middle symbol a bat symbol. Think of it that anytime you roll a bat symbol, you get to do all this extra stuff. It has to be addressed and has to come off the bat symbol before it can be placed down. So there's no wild tokens for bat symbols or anything like that, or extra tokens like this. So you can never put a bat symbol into your slots. They have to be addressed back here. Okay, so that really addresses all the actions that you can take. You don't have to spend every single action. You can leave movement on the board. You can leave attacks on the board. Obviously, you're going to run into that situation if you are stuck too far away from someone, or you have a really bad die roll and it's all defense. So it's going to happen. But the fact that you can share dice, you definitely want to talk to make sure, oh, I don't have any movement. Can either one of you share movement with me? And maybe Batman would have said, yes, I have some movement. Or, like Batgirl said, yes, I'm going to give you a movement. All right. Let's talk about skill cards and gear cards while we're at it. And I briefly touched on this earlier. So there are, let's put some of these out here as examples. Okay, 3 main types of skill cards. You have one-time use skill cards that basically can tell you when it can be played. If it's not specific, it basically is just any time on your turn. But once you play this, you can keep it out to remember, but otherwise it is then gone. It's put back in the box. You can't use it again. Or you have ones like Shield and Cape where you have to spend icons. So before you have spent all your icons here, this is Batman, he would have to say, all right, I'm going to spend this movement here and 1 focus token to activate Shield and Cape. Okay, but it doesn't go away. You can only use, however, 1 skill card per turn. So if I wanted to use Shield and Cape on my turn, I could not use Driven by the Past. Or if I had just used Driven by the Past, I cannot use Shield and Cape. The last type of skill cards are passive ones, which have the infinity symbol on them. These don't have to be spent. They're just always there. These represent passive abilities that, for the most part, you kind of want these laid down below your player boards so you can always keep them in mind. But again, you can only play one skill card per turn, but that passive skill cards do not count against that one per turn. All right, and then the only other cards that we need to talk about are your gear cards. And these, again, explain to you for the most part when you can play them. Usually it's going to be on your turn. It explains what happens. You don't have to pay anything to play these, but they are all single-use items. So once you use them, you lose them. Pretty straightforward. And again, only characters with the utility belt keyword can carry gear. All right, then there's support characters like this. The Beat Cops support characters activate with whoever they're attached to. In this case, it's Jim Gordon. When Jim Gordon activates, he can essentially give them 2 wild symbols. So he can have them shoot twice, he can have them move twice. They don't have very good stats, and you can see they're only ever rolling. So he can, let me just remind myself of the card here. It receives 2 wild action icons that can be used as move, melee strike, or ranged strike. So you cannot use them as doubles. So he cannot say, I'm giving you a double movement and a double ranged attack. But essentially what that means is he could either say, all right, I'm giving you 2 ranged attacks. That plus his base is 2. The best he can do is roll 3 dice if he's within range and spends all of his stuff. But if a Beat Cop, for example, has to spend one of his things on movement and then attack, he's only rolling 2 dice. Because he basically is taking that 1 ranged action plus his base of 1, and so the best he could do is 4, which doesn't even get past Man-Bat's defense value. So these are obviously support characters for a reason. They don't have amazing stats. They only have 3 health, but just know that support characters activate when whoever they're attached to activates. They don't have an initiation card. Okay, we talked about this earlier, but it should be very obvious that at the beginning of every round, you just start flipping these cards over. And for example, in this instance, the enforcers would get to go first. They say in the rulebook that if you have defeated an entire group, say we knock out all the enforcers, you don't remove their card from the stack. I don't know why, but they say just leave it in there, and when it comes back up again, just skip on to the next one. Also, if a character is not able to see, does not have line of sight on the heroes or any support characters, then they're not going to activate either. So here's Man-Bat, but he has a closed door in between this action and where he is. He cannot see us. So when his cards come up at the beginning of the game, until we've acquired these 2 clue tokens and open the door, he basically just gets skipped. It's not as if he moves slowly closer to the door and then opens it himself or any of that. He basically just stands here and waits. Okay, and basically you go through the initiative deck. That's 1 round. You pick these up, you shuffle them, and we start a new round. Pretty straightforward. The last thing that I'm going to cover here is the hired gun. I'm looking at the hired guns. Is how to activate the AI when you're playing cooperatively. So there are lots more rules for how you play competitively if one of you is playing the villain. I'm not going to cover those in this video here. As Rodney Smith likes to say, I will leave you to discover those on your own. But when the solo AI activates, it's pretty straightforward, but there is a little bit of terminology here that you need to understand, which also is probably the second most confusing part of the rulebook, and that's optimal strike range, essentially, or strike range. So for the melee characters, it's very simple. When they activate, are they adjacent to a character? No, then they move up to their movement value, attempting to get adjacent. Now, minions only get 1 movement per turn, and I believe it's just the minions. It may be villains in general. I'll have to confirm that, but I know the minions only get 1 movement action per turn. So say we were all way over here, these guys were away, and this guy went 1, 2, 3. He's actually adjacent now. Now, in this example, he's not. He's stuck. He can't do anything else. He cannot move again, and he's not within adjacent to attack. So he's done. The hired guns, however, and anybody with a ranged symbol, which means there's a number here instead of a punch symbol, has a lot more to think about. So the 4 represents their optimal strike range. Think of the hired guns similar to Robin. They do not reduce their hit point value. They don't take penalty as long as they are within 4 spaces of you. So what they're going to do first is they're going to check to see, is anyone in their optimal strike range? In this case, we would count 1, 2, 3, 4. No. 1, 2, 3, 4. He can't get to anybody. I'm referring to this gentleman right here. So, in that case, since he does not have anyone in optimal strike range and he has both actions, he will then move and take up to his movement value to put himself in optimal strike range. Now, he is 1, 2, 3, 4. From a character, but he's actually going to keep moving because his target, his optimal target priority is the person with the most health. Well, in this instance, at the beginning of the game, it's Batman, who has 13 health. He is 1, 2, 3. Okay, so he is 4 away from Batman. I apologize. Let's say, for example, Batman was over here on the corner. He would actually move 1 more so that he is within 4 of his optimal target, which is Batman. Then he would take his second action to attack Batman. No penalties would be ensued because he's within his optimal strike range. If, however, and this board really isn't big enough to show this off, but let's say this door was open and all these guys were way out here. And he got his movement. He would go 1, 2, 3. He's standing in the doorway, and now he's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, that's a bad example. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say that's as close as he gets. And now this is the part that I'm super unclear about, because he's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say he's right here. He can be within 5 of these 3 characters, but he's 6 away from Batman. Obviously, he would not take the shot at Batman because he's 2 outside of his optimal strike range, and he's only hitting for 2. So he'd hit for none. But again, this section is a little confusing. Essentially, though, if you have moved, if you have just taken a movement and you are just outside your optimal strike range, he will go ahead and fire, taking that penalty. So here now he is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 away from Batman. He is going to fire. He's going to take 1 penalty for being 1 space outside of his optimal strike range. And so he's only hitting for 1. So Batman then gets to roll his defense, which I messed with these, but it would be 4. So he's only got to block 1 to take a hit, and he did it. If, however, he moves, and he moves his maximum movement, and he does not have his priority target in strike range, he then moves to the next closest person. If the hired guns or any ranged villain or AI already has someone in optimal strike range. So in this instance, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4. He's got these 3 people in optimal strike range. He's not going to move just to put himself at range of Batman. He is going to go ahead and take a shot at one of these guys. We would look to see who has the next highest health and work our way down the board. So again, it's a little confusing as to when they move and shoot and attack, and I wish that they had just made it simpler and said, look, the hired gun's not going to shoot unless he's within 4. If he's within 4 of anyone, he's going to shoot. If his priority target's within 4, he's going to shoot at that person. If he is not within 4 of anybody, he's going to move 4 or 3 in his case towards his priority target, which would be Batman. I feel like those would have been much easier to explain and keep up with. Instead, we have this optimal target range. Is he, within his, there's should be a third keyword, optimal strike range, and nil strike range or something like that, because anything beyond 6 for him is a nil strike range. He's going to inflict 0 hits. So again, I know I'm just bantering on about this, but these were 2 areas of the rule book that I felt like they definitely could have done a little bit better job editing. Anyways, that is essentially how the AI activates. You're going to go through an entire figurines 2 actions before you move on to the next one. Ranged people are always going to stop when they're at their perfect optimal strike range. They're not going to run right up to someone. And minions always get 2 actions, and boss villains get 3. So that's why I'm wondering whether or not Man-Bat, for example, would get to move, attack, and move, or move twice and then attack, or whether he also only gets 1 movement. I will try and clarify that and put it in the comment section below. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is essentially how you play the game. Again, there's objectives in this scenario book on what we have to do. In this case, we have to pick up these 2 clues, open this door, and then KO Man-Bat. If, however, all of our characters are reduced to are knocked out, then we lose the game. Or if they're all thrown off, or if any one person's thrown off the building here and nobody rescues them, then we're dead, things like that. So there's a whole lot of status tokens in the game, terrain tokens that change up the terrain. My suggestion to you is to keep the back of the rulebook open, because there's glossaries for status effects, there's glossaries for terrain, all that kind of stuff. The iconography on the dice is very straightforward, and once you can remember that, attacking and defending is adding the symbols plus your base, and movement is multiplying the symbols times your base, then you're good. The only other thing you should really look into is making sure you have Awakening down, which doesn't come into play that much, and the optimal strike range keyword and how that works. I still feel like I don't have that quite down, but at the end of the day, it's my game. I basically just move the hired gun how I feel like a player-controlled person would move him, and I sleep just fine. So, all right. I'm going to clean up a little bit this, and we're going to focus just on Batman so that we can cover some of his Dark Knight exclusive gameplay and how we set up and play for that in a true solo mode. Okay, so when you want to play true solo, you need to play with Batman, obviously. He's the only character you can play true solo with, and you're going to flip over his sheet so it's on the side that says The Dark Knight. And it even reminds you. So this one just says Prepared and Escalation. This one says The Dark Knight, and it's basically telling you here that he's the only character. It requires the extension token and the I'm Batman skill card. So that's basically it tells you here everything you need to find. So here is the I'm Batman skill card. Now this is a passive skill card, and basically all it says is that he can perform special actions on himself. So anytime that it normally would have been, heal a friend or something like that, heal another character, he can do that to himself. So any positive action that he would have normally taken towards his teammates, he's going to always put on himself. And also, he gets to regain a focus at the end of every round. Now, that's important because it's round, not turn, because the next thing we're going to need are 2 additional initiative cards for Batman. So when Batman's playing solo mode, he actually gets 3 turns within a round. Okay, so again, he regains a focus at the start of each round, not turn, because he's actually getting 3 turns. The last thing you're going to need is this little extender here, which this extender is a little obnoxious to me for several reasons. One is it doesn't fit into their fancy stretch goals here. And the other thing is, all this does is increase these stats. Why didn't they just print those on this side of the card? They made 2 sides of the card. Otherwise, they're really kind of the same. The 2 sides of the card, the stats are the same, prepared is the same. The only thing that this side has is the Dark Knight setup, which they could just put in the rule book, and once you've played once, you're going to have it memorized. Otherwise, nothing is different between this side of the sheet and the other side of the sheet. Why did they not just give him a POW base of 3, a defense base of 4, and 15 health and 7 awakening value? It's maddening why they thought that this was a good idea to have this extra piece here. I mean, truly, I'm honestly considering just printing my own version of this card with the upgraded stats. The only other thing on this board here that is going to be visible, there's some, text on the back here, but it just explains to you what I am about to explain to you now. So again, completely worthless once you've learned how to play the game. And see, it doesn't even stay lined up. I mean, honestly, how obnoxious is that? Anyways, what this is telling you is how you set up his dice at the beginning of every round. So you're still going to get the prepared action. So I could still say, I'm going to do a double hit, and then I've got to roll 2. So I'm going to roll these 2. Now, what's going to happen is that whatever die you place in this left slot here, which is essentially the 1, see, it bothers me also that these don't line up with what's here. You get to double. So say I put this here, now I can go ahead and take a token and double it. So now I have a ton of punch. I'm doing a lot of punching this round. But say, for example, I only rolled a single punch, which I don't have. Say it was just a single movement. I can't turn this into a double movement. I'm just basically making a carbon copy of what I placed here with my token. Then whatever I place here, nothing happens with. The last thing, because I need 5 action dice to make it equivalent, is a wild token. So I can make this whatever token I want. Say we're back to this, and I'm like, bam, I am cooking with gas. I could really use a defensive symbol here, so I'm going to make it a punch and a defense symbol. Something crazy like that. So again, for Batman, you can place this one, you roll these 2, and then whatever you place here, you double. This has no effect, and this can be whatever token you so choose. Remember, you can't make it a bat symbol. Then, while you're playing, you play the exact same way with just some increased stats. But when your turn is over, or when your card comes back up, essentially for your second and third turn, you actually get to unexhaust all your dice and your token, and you can change this wild token. So say you're now out of the action and you need to run and chase after a man-bat, you can give yourself, say, an extra movement. Or maybe you are really looking for some crazy punching, you can make it another double punch. Whatever you want. So you can change this token, which is your wild choice, between each turn. You only gain a focus at the start of each round. Other than that, your loadout is exactly the same. You've got 4 skill cards, so you could take this same loadout into battle. 3 skill cards plus 4 gear. That doesn't change, but essentially that's how you go about addressing things in Dark Knight mode. You're going to get more turns, you're going to get some beefed up stats, and you're going to get a lot more choices in your dice. So you're placing a lot more dice versus rolling them. Otherwise, you still spend focus the same way, you still spend your skill cards the same way, and your gadgets and gear the same way. Nothing is really different. Again, you need the I'm Batman skill card. You need the 2 additional Dark Knight initiative cards, and this stupid little cardboard thing here. Other than that, you are ready to play through solo mode, and nothing else changes as far as the solo AI or anything like that. Nothing changes. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to cover everything, in my opinion, you need to know to set up and play Batman the Animated Series, Shadow of the Bat. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more content like this in the future, please consider subscribing to the channel. We will be doing a true solo playthrough of the game to show off the Dark Knight mode, because I haven't seen that mode get a lot of coverage. So you'll see this setup here in my next video covering Batman the Animated Series. So if you're interested in that, please consider subscribing, hit that bell icon so you can be notified when I post that video to YouTube. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Have a great night.